This is Mick and the Fat Man, and we're talking life and music from the 60s through to the noughties. Welcome everybody to Mick and the Fat Man Talking Music. I'm the Fat Man and we're coming to you live from the Riverwood Scout Hall in Sydney, Australia, right across the road from the beautiful Bland Oval. And with me is Mick. G'day Mick, how you going?
I'm going great, mate.
Mick, being our first episode, I think it's probably useful if we give people a bit of a rundown on why we're here and what are we doing.
Okay, sure. We're a couple of blokes who were born and raised in the southwest of Sydney, an average suburb. We've been music fanatics since before we were teens. And I think that what we've got to give the world is a different take on music compared to someone who was brought up in the UK or the US, for instance.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think in our time as we were growing up, it was the rise of Australian music where the Australians weren't just doing covers of overseas songs. So we saw the rise of Australian music, original music, as we grew up.
That's very true, but we also saw a growing appreciation of what else was happening in the world. And it wasn't just the top 40, and we'll talk about top 40s as we go along, but it wasn't just the bands that made it onto the top 40, no matter how good they might have been. There was a growing appreciation of a lot of second and third tier bands and individuals, so good understanding of music all round.
And what sort of stuff are we likely to talk about? What sort of gems will we share with our audience?
Well, we've been to a lot of concerts, we've been to a lot of shows, we've met and seen a lot of people. So I think we're going to be talking about music, bands, albums, concerts, connections, and how they affected us growing up in a world that was very different in very many ways to the one we have today.
Yeah, it was. And will we talk about anything that might relate to beer, do you think?
I don't know if we'll talk about it, but we might guzzle a few as we're recording, which may help the fluidity of it.
May do. Look forward to it. And what do you reckon people will get from the podcast? What are they going to take away from this podcast?
I think they'll get lots of snippets of knowledge about this, that, or the other, because I know that you and I have been reading magazines from Go Set in the 70s all the way through to whatever's available in the newsstand these days. Plus, God knows what's on the internet. So lots of knowledge and snippets about their favourite musicians, little anecdotes, lots of opinions. And some of it might even be valid.
Yeah, or most of it probably not. But I think it's useful now that we're in the world of the internet. The accessibility of information is so different to what it was as we grew up. You had to get a magazine or you had to see it on TV. There was no other source. I mean, you weren't going to find the history of Pink Floyd in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
No.
No, you weren't. All right, so let's move on. I think one of the things we're always going to kick off with is what we've been listening to in the last week or so. And Mick, what have you been listening to?
Well, funnily enough, I've been listening to a song called Hallelujah, which was written by Leonard Cohen, but I've been listening to the John Cale version. I think everybody...
Why would you be doing that?
Well...
Why would you do that, sir?
Well, John Cale, who is one of the founder members of the Velvet Underground, and he's a fellow we'll talk about later.
No doubt.
Yeah, no doubt indeed. And he recorded the first version of Hallelujah, which became the template for everybody else's versions. The execrable Jeff Buckley version, K.D. Lang, Bono. In fact, even the version that Cale arranged became Leonard Cohen's version. He took it and reworked his own.
Do we express an opinion of the Jeff Buckley version?
Should I? You want a definition for execrable, do you? No,
because that word doesn't really mean anything to me.
That's very true. Jeff Buckley's not on my top 10 favourites.
No.
A soprano squaller, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, I don't like him very much. And he's note for note the version that he recorded and sold a lot of copies of is the Cale arrangement. And it was on an album called I'm Your Fan, which was a tribute album in the very early 90s with a whole lot of bands doing various Leonard Cohen tracks, people like the Pixies.
Was that the first time the John Cale version was recorded on that?
Yes, yes.
Oh, there you go.
And it appeared later it even appeared in Shrek. So if you've seen the movie Shrek, it's the John Cale version that they're playing as Shrek wanders around doing whatever it is that Shrek does.
Things that green people do.
Well, indeed. But they did edit it because Hallelujah, nobody really seems to look at the words, but it is so laden with sex, the song. It's because Leonard Cohen, in his own book, I'm Your Man, Leonard Cohen actually said that the reason he started music was to get laid.
And an honourable choice too, I believe.
I think that's a wonderful thing.
But he wasn't a great singer though, was he? He was more of a talker.
Absolutely. It's a bit like Dylan. Writes absolutely wonderful songs that are so much better done by others.
Yeah, because he sounds like a squealing cat. But
yeah.
Anyway, so I've been listening to something that come out of the woods the other day. The Indelible Merceps.
Spectrum.
Indeed, the Spectrum Alter Ego, and great album by them, which has got that great song "Excuse Me," which has the line "Excuse me just one moment while I throw up on your couch," and finishes with a great soundbite of someone vomiting.
Was this before or after the increasing sophistication of Australian music you referred to earlier?
This was oddly enough during it, but it was an interesting. The album was actually "Warts Up Your Nose." I'd forgotten that there was "Warts Up Your Nose," and there's another song on that album which is called "On the Bog," which is just great.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you are listening to now could well be the last of our podcasts ever.
And they, I don't know whether the Indelible Merceps did do some songs, but they were usually done on a Spectrum concert. So Spectrum were really around in the early 70s, late 60s, I think, from memory. And Mike Rudd and I can't remember the name of the bass player with the big Mo.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
No, I don't know.
Another one.
Anyway, so what we thought we might talk about on this show is our first purchases in record spaces, and I'll kick this one off, Mick. My very first record that I ever bought was Revolver by the Beatles. And I was trying to think back as why on earth did I buy Revolver? Why didn't I buy, I don't know, Sgt. Pepper or Abbey Road or something like that? But I'd forgotten that, in fact, my brother had the albums Abbey Road, Let It Be, and Sgt. Pepper. So I bought the next one before that, which was Revolver. And I'm not going to talk a huge amount about Revolver because realistically it's, there's plenty of people out there that are Beatle experts that know a lot more about the Beatles than I ever will. But I will note that, pardon me, that the album was really their first album. They'd actually made a decision never to tour again. So it was the first album where they really started to experiment with music and with using things like double tracking and reverse tapes, and I wrote this down, closed audio miking. I don't know what it means, but it sounds very good. So they really played with the music, and that was Epstein was obviously their integral in that sort of stuff. So there's lots of more complex stuff that back in those days would have been, back in 1966, would have been fairly difficult to take on the road with them. The other thing that's unusual about that album was that it was had 3 Harrison-written songs on there, which is fairly unusual for the band that's credited with McCartney and Lennon, but it was 3 Harrison songs on there. And I don't know whether it was the first time, but certainly one of the early albums where you saw the use of the sitar on there. And I, for the life of me, don't know whether Ravi Shankar was doing it, but if you go back in the day and look at some of the old concerts and things like that when Ravi Shankar was around, you could sit and watch a good 30 minutes of Ravi Shankar on a concert, and I don't mind a little bit of it. It can be a little bit trying at time after about 30 minutes of it. But
30 seconds.
I think if you're taking the appropriate substance, probably the sitar and that music sounds pretty good, I would have thought.
Funny you should mention Lennon and McCartney. I was reading an article recently, an interview with Eric Idle, who was talking about the growing pains of Monty Python. And the funding issues that they had with their various movies, Life of Brian, Holy Grail, and so on. And George Harrison was very much involved in funding and keeping Monty Python alive, and almost singularly funded Holy Grail.
Life of Brian, was it?
Both, yeah.
And I remember listening to Eric Idle talking about George, and he basically went in and was talking to George Harrison about the Holy Grail, and George said, "I'll fund it because I just want to be able to watch the movie."
Yeah, and the more I read about George Harrison, the more of an interesting, he's because Lennon McCartney gets so much airplay, he's very much the other guy in the Beatles. Everyone knows Ringo, but George is there, and he's very deep, very considerate, and really loved life. But the story that I read, Eric Idle, on the set of the movie, Eric Idle was having a D&M with Harrison, and he said, I won't even try and do his accent, but he was complaining about the difficulty of getting screen time when you've got people like Palin and Cleese there. And Harrison says, "Oh, I understand. You try getting some studio time with Lennon and McCartney."
Actually, that's it's interesting because George was the man who brought LSD into the Beatles, and it was really the revival where they really started using some acid. It was him and Lennon who were using a reasonable amount of acid. I think Ringo had a bit, but Paul never did. No. He was a good, upstanding, clean fellow, which is good to see.
Yeah. I've always thought
his mistakes really came when he wanted to have sex with a one-legged hooker, I think. But anyway, let's move on from that.
That was later. The Beatles had split up by then.
Oh, right, okay, I've forgotten. Now, the other thing that's interesting is the cover of the album of Revolver was done by, and it's actually interesting because if you look at the earlier Beatles albums, they're just sort of the 4 photos of the Fab Four on the front of the cover. But this one was a drawing which was done by a fellow by the name of Klaas Voorman. And he was basically a session muso, but he was the original bass player for Manfred Mann. And but he played with many people over the years, including Lou Reed, Carly Simon, James Taylor, Harry Nilsson. He was even a member of Yoko Ono and Lennon's Plastic Ono band for a while. So, yeah, sort of an interesting fellow. And if you go online, you can actually still buy drawings of his, including drawings like different versions of the Revolver album on his website.
Oh, cool.
So I suggest you go on there and get a Revolver.
An original.
Original by Klaus.
Yep, absolutely. That sounds fantastic.
So what I thought I'd just go on to now, the top 40. So the Revolver was released in 1966, and in Australia in 1966, the top song. So this is for the entire year. Was the top song for the entire year in 1966 was Nancy Sinatra, "These Boots Are Made for Walking."
And they were.
They were indeed. But as you go down, there's some interesting things like Normie Rowe, "Ooh La La," and who could forget that? I know I did. The Easy Beats, though, "Friday on My Mind."
Mm-hmm. Great song.
"Painted Black" by the Stones. "Good Vibrations" by the Beatles were in there. The Beatles had about 4 songs on there, so I'm not going to go through each one of those.
Good Vibrations. Did the Beatles do a cover of that? I thought the Beach Boys did the original of Good Vibrations.
They did, and then there was the cover, which obviously screwed up. The Trogs, "Wild Thing."
Ah, right.
was there, and
another one covered by hundreds of bands.
Yeah. And "Spicks and Specks" by the Bee Gees.
My goodness.
That's a long time ago.
It just goes to show how long the Bee Gees have been around.
It does indeed. I think they're a little bit younger.
Well, some of them.
Well, one of them, in fact, but just the one. I'm missing a couple now. I don't know where they went. And then just go back to that "Boots Are Made for Walking," Nancy Sinatra. As you remember, back in the day, I used to play in a band, and I played bass guitar in that band. And I used to use a book for scales and those sorts of things and riffs from a person by the name of Carol Kay. And she turned out to be, she was a session muso, and she did the bass on "These Boots Are Made for Walking." And if you think back and listen to the iconic line that's in there for the boots are made for walking, it was a dung, dung, dung.
Bung, 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 bung.
Well, apparently when she went to do that song, pardon me, they wanted them to be boom, 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 boom. But no, she decided, no, we won't do that. We'll do this. And so that became the iconic bass line. And she went on to record something over 10,000 recordings in session work, and became one of the most prolific session musos out there. And went on to work with people like the Beach Boys, and also did some of the classic movie things like shows things from things like Hawaii 5-0 and those sorts of things. So a very prolific muso over the years, and she was one of the groundbreakers as far as moving into the music world as a session muso, because essentially it was a male-dominated world, and there was this. If you go online and look at a few photos of her back in those days, she's this petite little thing with a nice big jazz Fender Precision bass, churning out amazing music. So an interesting woman there. So I was going to say she. That's right. Yeah, she also worked with the bass line on "Feeling All Right" by Joe Cocker.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, and did a lot of work apparently with Phil Spector and didn't get shot, so that was good. Lucky for her.
It's an achievement.
It is an achievement if you do a lot of work. Righteous Brothers, she did You Lost That Love and Feeling. But the thing I found interesting also is she does so much work with she did so much work with bands when the bands didn't do their own bass work, even though they had a bass player. So I mean that's common obviously with when they realise that the band is not a very good muso, has not particularly good musos in it. So
is that bass players in general or just some?
Just some, but also musos and people who need to do a guitar solo and they're not particularly good at doing a guitar solo, or perhaps a piano solo, Michael, if the truth be known.
Indeed.
Let's move on, shall we? Smart ass. So give us what about you? What was the first album you ever bought?
Hard to remember that far back, but I believe that probably one of the first albums I bought was Hot August Night by Neil Diamond.
Now, when was that?
That was back in the early 70s, about 1972.
Was it that early, was it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because he released several other Hot August Nights, version 2, version 3, over the next decade or two. But what just looking back on it, and when we were talking about what our earliest album would have been, back then he wasn't the fairly conservative, quiet, soundtrack making 2CH type music person. Back then he was right on the edge. He did some really great stuff. Hot August Night sounds like it was an absolutely awesome concert. He did some lovely folk based stuff, but he also rocked out a bit.
Yep.
And there's a DJ in Sydney who loves him, and they've interviewed Neil Diamond a couple of times, and he just constantly talks about "Take it, Alan."
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
So, and the Tree People, who were the Tree People?
Tree People were people who were in the park, the Greek Theatre, which is an outdoor theatre in LA, and they climbed up in the trees to be able to look over the fence and watch the concert for free.
That's right. Hello, Tree People.
Yeah, I'm singing for you too. So it was a great album. It was huge. As I say, Diamond was well regarded as one of the top of that crop of late '60s early singers and songwriters.
Yeah,
Then he did Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
And gee, I bought that album. I don't know why. I can't remember now. I ended up with it, but it was terrible.
Yeah,
really, really just terrible. Unfortunately, I don't know why I bought it.
Maybe he churned out all of his go-gettingness on Hot August Night.
But also, the movie was terrible as well.
Very much of that philosophy of go get it, you can do it. Every man can talk themselves into their own success type nonsense that they carried. Oh God, see, I can't even speak about it.
I was going to run through a couple of my albums that I had on high rotation back in the 70s, and Hot August Night was indeed one of them. 1972, you're right. Zeppelin 4, I think, was also another album that was
Of course.
that was out there. That was 71. I thought I would have bet $1,000,000 it was later than 71 that came out.
It was 71, but it really copped a caning through 72.
Oh, right. Yeah, it was, and it was
in fact, from then until now.
Yes. Although I think it's actually come off the best, Stairway to Heaven's actually no longer the best guitar solo in the history of the world. I don't think it's actually up there anymore. It was there for a very long time on Triple M from my memory. Yellow Brick Road was there in 73, Bad Company in 74, and then one of the big albums that I thoroughly enjoyed was the first Tubes album, The Tubes.
Absolutely.
75, would you believe?
Wow.
And then 801 Live, 76.
Yep. Ziggy Stardust, 72.
That far back as well, that's right.
It's frightening.
Yeah, so there was and of course back in 74, speaking of Australian bands, original Australian bands, was Living in the 70s by Skyhooks.
Yeah, it's wonderful, yeah. Now, Skyhooks, there used to be a show sponsored by the film company Polaroid on television in the early 70s, 73 through about 76, and it was called Polaroid in Concert, where they used to have Australian bands on there, and that was the first time I ever saw Skyhooks. Out of nowhere, they're a band out of Melbourne, so Melbourne had a reputation of producing somewhat theatrical bands, and Skyhooks absolutely fit that bill. You had Shirley done up in satins, with his Shirley Temple type hair. Red Simmons, before he became a gong basher on the Saturday night TV. He actually used to dress up in almost Rocky Horror type costumes on stage and
poke his tongue out
and led the crowd in a chant of "suck shit."
I'd forgotten that.
Which was interesting, yeah. So that showed you were saying before about Australian music. The Polaroid in Concert showed a lot of Australian bands, and again, that's something that people could get a lot of value out of looking up. I'm sure there's stuff like that on YouTube.
I'll give you one other Australian album that I did buy, which I rate as one of my worst albums, which was John English Inroads. It was a terrible album. And one of the things that I made a mistake of doing, and I can't remember how it happened, but back in the early 70s, I joined a record club. Remember record clubs?
Oh, yes.
It used to be on the back of magazines, buy 5 records for $1, and then there's always a thing saying, we'll send you a new record every month, which you can send back if you don't want it. And then I used to always forget to send them back. And John English Inroads was one of those albums, which I did play once, just the once. And
which is a shame because he did some nice stuff as well, some really good stuff.
That's right, 6 Ribbons.
Yep, bit before that, mate. Yeah. Well, we're talking about Neil Diamond doing soundtrack. John English did theme songs.
He did. I'll buy you 6 ribbons to tie up your hair.
It's from a TV show called Against the Wind.
Oh, yes, I'd forgotten that. And I'll give you one other album that I ended up with. I think I got it out of the junk pile in a record shop. Krabby Appleton.
I had that.
Did you?
I think I inherited it from someone who didn't know what they were doing. But yes, awful.
Awful album. But in fact, if you go to Wikipedia, if you go and look up Krabby Appleton, they do have an entry in Wikipedia, and their album is on Apple Music. So you can. So if you are feeling feeling like listening to something bad, suggest you have a look for Krabby Appleton. We'll build up a bit of a playlist out of this podcast and put it onto Spotify for you to have a look at. We might find a Krabby Appleton song just for your edification and enjoyment to pop onto that playlist if we're lucky.
Yep. With that suggested playlist, I think there's going to be a lot of stuff on there for people to play to their grandparents, mate.
Yeah, if they're, well, I don't know.
Anybody.
Yeah. So, but I don't think we'll put any John English songs on there, despite the fact that you said there's a couple that are good. I think we might move away from there. What about you? What was it was really Bowie that was on high rotation for you in your early 70s, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I really think that quite soon we should talk about the impact of the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars on music, English music, and us and me.
All right, and thanks for that, Mick. And I think we might call it a wrap for today. Just to remind you that we have got a Facebook page, which we'll link in the show notes. You'll also see the email address in there if you need to contact us and whinge about some of our facts or whatever. We'll also have, as we said before, some of that recommended listening with or without John English. I'm not altogether sure. And we hope basically to see you next time. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye now.